Welcome to Socializing Security, where every week we have a discussion about security, compliance, and beyond.
Our goal is to learn and grow by socializing each week's topic with each other, our guests, and with you.
A quick compliance note, this podcast is meant for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal or regulatory advice.
We're glad you've joined us, and we hope you'll learn along with us.
Welcome back to another episode of Socializing Security. Brian, I think you and I were both just saying that we're feeling a little sleepy today, or a little, I think, just like in it at the moment. How are you doing?
Yeah, it's been a day after several long weeks for me, both professionally and personally. It's been kind of a when it rains it pours situation. So if I sound a little tired, it's because I am, but that's okay. I'm excited to be here to record another episode. This has definitely been a highlight of the week.
Yeah, I am happy to be here, and I think we're going to do a little bit of a different format today, as opposed to picking a specific topic and really diving into like an information security, compliance, or privacy specific topic. We're just really going to do an episode on where we're at. We are actively building a podcast, and we're very much learning as we go. And part of what we're doing here is making sure that, we're being honest and open with our audience about how the experience is, because I think you and I also are learning a lot as we go.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more. I think you recently had a friend of ours say something about two perfectionists walk into a podcast.
Yes. A lot of mutual acquaintances. So there's been some interesting conversations that happened in the background. And one of those was, wow, you two are both so particular and so, want things to be right. To use that language, perfectionists. I'll own that one. They were interested in kind of what the background was and how things were going for us. And to be honest, we both kind of wanted to dot every I and cross every T before we started recording. And then one day we were like, you know what, we just need to start recording. So it's been going well. I think we'll get into some of the stuff we've been doing to try and make this take off before we really have released it to people. So hence a little bit of a meta topic this time around. And, just making sure that it's the quality, the type of content that we really want it to be. So, we have been pretty perfectionist with it, but being conscious of that so that we don't, analysis by paralysis type of situation.
Yeah, again, I also don't mind being called a perfectionist. I'll take it for what it is. This is reminding me of like, if you're like in an interview and the interviewer is like, oh, tell me like one of your biggest strengths that's also a weakness or something. And I do think our strength absolutely is that in this regard, we're quite similar in that in totally different worlds. I'm getting really into like the compliance and legal ramifications of the podcast versus you're focusing more on the IT and the marketing and thinking through like what that looks like because of our professional backgrounds and making sure that it's representative of who we are as people and professionals. And so I do think we've been more mindful about context and scope and what our ultimate goal is, because I think this is also a really big time commitment for the two of us. So making sure that we're like, is this valuable? And so I'm really proud of where we are so far, and I'm excited about the progress that we're seeing. I even, as we've been recording more episodes, you're a little bit more of a veteran in the podcasting space because this isn't your first podcast. I have been interviewed on podcasts as a guest before, but it's very different than being one of the hosts. And so there's way more prep and logistics that go into it. And so I think, how are you feeling now that we're kind of months really into the process?
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out, what's the right format, how do we want things to flow. I think the pre-planning that we did worked out really well because we really haven't had to throw anything away. I think maybe we've got one episode that'll never see the light of day.
I was really tired. I'm pretty sure that was the reason that I was like, I don't know if I love that one.
Yeah. And it was honestly one of those that got to the point where we kind of knew we were comfortable doing this when we hit that episode, because it wasn't so much that we didn't know what we were doing. It was more about the fact that we were pretty comfortable and we went a little maybe too loose on that episode.
The more you talk about it, the more likely it is we're going to have to release it.
That's the friends and family discount type of thing, maybe. That'll be our first worm on the hook for getting people to subscribe or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, we've got a lot of episodes in the can. We're pretty happy with what we have.
Yeah, I think what we're learning is I think the chemistry that you and I have when we're chatting and like talking between the two of us is like, I think we're in like a pretty good flow and understand like when to give cues and stuff. There is something about when you're talking and doing interviews of learning how to pause and let the person like just finish their thought and also like prompt the next question. We also deal with a lot of technical challenges where suddenly one of us is recording and the other one just disappears for about 20 seconds.
Yeah.
As I say that, my dog is barking.
Oh, classic. So yeah, I mean it's a lot of things to work out is kind of what it comes down to. And you can only have it be so right at the beginning without pushing off the beginning forever. So, a lot of stuff we're still tuning in. We're very open to feedback from everybody that listens to it. You won't see that feedback necessarily get applied immediately because we do have, we're trying to pre-plan stuff so that we get a weekly cadence of releases, even if we can't get a weekly cadence of recording. So, there's been a couple weeks already that, both of us were out of town or unavailable to record. So we bumped it or, focused on admin stuff on as far as planning and that kind of thing. So definitely want to get to a steady cadence at that point. And part of that, of course, is getting guests on the show. We don't want it to be just the two of us talking. So maybe talk a little bit about the guests that we've started to interview at this point and kind of have lined up to go forward.
Yeah, what's been really valuable is honestly, the positive feedback we've also just been getting from people that were like, hey, Brian and I are doing this and we would love to have your thought leadership. And we're also really open to guest suggestions and different topics. And we're really not, I like that we're a little bit more fluid and, we have a pretty large topic area. So whether it's compliance, legal, IT, security, like privacy, there's really so many different angles for us, as well as like entrepreneurship and starting a company. There's all things that like we can really relate to and really are also learning with our speakers. What I'll say too is figuring out the finesse of, we got some feedback as well of how does it work when two people are interviewing the same person and what is that cadence like and what's that flow? And I think, without even really like planning that, I think we kind of just established we're like kind of popcorning. And then, or it's like if one question lends more to our background than the other, we just kind of jump in and give the other the opportunity to just make sure we're speaking relatively equally. I think that's something we're messing around with. I think I didn't even really think about that as a particular challenge until we were a guest on a podcast and they were like, that's going to be a challenge. And I was like, oh, it's like, well, shoot, I think you're right.
Yeah. And that definitely is a challenge. It's easy when it's just two people, especially when one's a host and one's a guest. It's a lot easier to control. As you add in two hosts working equally together, then we dealt with some challenges around that and worked through that. And now that we've started getting a third person as a guest, it does take a little bit more thought. You have to assume that you're only going to get 25% of the time on any given episode because you want to give your guest half the time because we're here to learn from them. So give them the mic as much as possible. And we're really just there to make it interactive, to break things up a little bit, if you will, because listening to anybody monologue is, it can be interesting, but it can also get tedious. I don't want to say boring by any stretch of the imagination, but sometimes tedious. So yeah, these are the things that we got to work out.
Yeah, and I think also just the logistics of suddenly planning, you and I, we hold ourselves pretty well to we record at a standard time every week and for the most part. And there's a little bit of flexibility of being like, hey, I think, I might need to push this a couple hours. And I think for the most part, that's been really easy for us to figure out. When there's another person in that, right, ideally amazing if they can join our recording spot, but like not everybody can do that. And so suddenly making sure that we're being more accommodating and a little bit more flexible is awesome. But again, we're figuring out, we're like, okay, we still really want to continue to make time for this. This is a priority for us. We're really enjoying the conversations that we're having. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of like some of the upcoming episodes. I'm not sure where they'll be at, where we decide to release where this episode slots in. So I don't want to spoil too much. But what I do really like is the format that we've started to come up with for our speakers, where you and I are getting together to record like an intro to making sure that we're introducing the guest ahead of time, that we're thinking about making sure we're prepared also with our audience, and like prepping the conversation a little bit of framing. And then that way we're not spending too much time of the actual episode, right, interviewing the person as being like, tell us about your background. We're like, we already did that. We already introduced you. We think you're awesome. And we're so happy. And we just want to go talk about the things that we really want to talk to you about and dive into that part of it. So I'm excited about that. And I'm really curious to start getting feedback about how that is being received.
Yeah. Yeah. And another shtick that we decided to do is usually immediately after, like as soon as the guest drops off, we'll record us talking about that conversation. And then tagging that on at the end as kind of a little extra 10, 15 minutes at the end of the episode about our reactions to that. What did we learn? And I really like that because, I mean, you and I would talk about that no matter when we got on a call together, and we would eat at a time later anyways, because it usually is a fascinating conversation that we want to talk about because it's, hey, I learned something really cool. What did you learn from that? Oh man, I missed that. That now I've learned two really big things. Is a great conversation, I think, to use to wrap up that interview.
Yeah, what I'm noticing about the speaker sessions that I'm so excited about is there's certain individuals that I'm fortunate that I've been personally going out and trying to meet more people locally where I live. And that has also mean that I'm meeting more tech professionals, which is great, and doing in-person events, which I really haven't done since the pandemic. Like I haven't done much on the like networking side because it just didn't feel like that important at the time. And now I'm like, shoot, I've been missing out. And so I've been really getting more involved in more tech events locally and making sure that I'm meeting people. But what's so great about it is this is also starting to become a pipeline for us about being like, wow, I had this awesome conversation about what somebody is working on. And I'm like, maybe they should be a guest.
Yeah.
And so instead of like shamelessly selling them something or something at this networking group, I'm just like, hey, do you have any free time? Would you come join us for a little bit and tell us about your background or things that you're working on, or, and the feedback's been good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was recently at a conference and was able to chat with a few people about it, hand out a few stickers. One of them is a guest that I had on a previous podcast that I was hosting, and they were immediately in. Like, yeah, bring me on whenever you're ready. I would love to do it. And knowing one, it's a great icebreaker for an introvert like me to be able to start talking about my podcast. It gives me something to be excited about, and that helps me have something to care about in the conversation. Not that I don't care about talking to people, but if you're an introvert, you understand. Like you have to have that hook that really engages you, and also to be able to have that touch point that I can go back to that person and say, okay, cool, we really want to get you on this on our podcast. We talked about this topic. I think this would be interesting for our audience to hear more about. I would like to learn more, and I know Milou would like to learn more. So let's figure out a time that works. And we're both doing that. And I'm excited to bring on the people that I know and talk to them and introduce you to them, and equally excited to meet the people that you're running into and hearing what their experiences are, because I tell you what, the most interesting thing about this industry is the wide variety of experiences people have had. I've had a lot of experiences myself, having been on the customer side and working for vendors and working for VARs and working for service providers and working, large companies and small companies. But there's so many different areas that I've never been in. I'm thinking of a friend of mine here locally where I live who he's an IT manager in a generally small companies. And I'm probably going to ask him next time I see him if he'd be interested in recording a podcast with us, because everybody's experiences matter. Everybody's got a good story about what they did wrong, what they did right, and how they would do it better next time.
I mean, that's the beauty of what we're realizing is you and I aren't struggling with content. Like we're very fortunate, and I'm sure there will be a week or a couple that we're like, oh, what are we going to talk about? And I think the beauty of it is because you and I are exposed to so many different things in our day to day, whether we're meeting with different professionals or just like in our day to day at work. There are so many different things that I'm spending time like looking into and being like, oh, interesting. Like I should write this down, or, oh, let me just send a quick message to Brian and be like, what do we think about this? Or did you hear about this? And it's great because we're not struggling with topics, which again, I think is a privilege. I'm sure there will be a time where writer's block comes up for us, and then we might really need to outsource to the community and ask for your help. So stay tuned for that. But I mean, it's the same way of like the content creation part of it, of realizing we're like, oh no, we actually have a lot to say in this space. And we're even more excited to learn from other professionals that are also dealing with similar challenges. Or again, things that we're just like, oh, that's not in my purview, but I do actually want to learn about it. And that might be really valuable, because I also just think there's an opportunity when we're listening to how people are solving problems in their day to day, whether it's the same type of work that you and I are doing, it still could ignite just like, or inspire ideas of being like, I hadn't thought about that for this scenario in my space. And figuring that out, I think, is again something why we keep being like, we're learning with our speakers. We're not just like interviewing them. We're really like bringing them on to continue to socialize security topics, but also really learn with them.
Yes, definitely. And it touches every aspect of everything we do. It's something we've discussed on different episodes about, security is not just me as a professional in the cybersecurity space thinking about it day in and day out, but our parents have to deal with it, and they're not technical whatsoever. But it's something they need to think about because it affects all of us. And so, no matter who the person is, no matter what their experiences are, no matter what their current role is, no matter what their current interests are, there's a hook. There's a way to pivot it into that. I've been listening to the audiobook for Ghost in the Wire, which is Kevin Mitnick's autobiography. And I would say 80% of his stories are social engineering. Like, he doesn't talk about using a computer all that often. It's mostly calling people up and trying to get information out of them. And again, that affects all of us. We've all gotten that weird call. We're like, is this real? Deep
Oh man,
fakes, all that kind of thing.
I'm getting so many because as a like founder, I'm getting hit by so many things on social media and stuff. Also, just as a content creator, because I'm quite loud in that space, of realizing the noise that comes with that, of things that I'm like, I don't think this is real, or what is this? Or like, not only are people like selling things or trying to offer help, whatever, that's great. But there's also things that I'm like, I don't think this is a real thing. And then I'm starting to realize that like a bunch of companies are using like avatars and like fake things on like platforms like LinkedIn for like lead generation. And that's something that we know exists, but I just probably haven't seen it that clearly in like my day to day. Normally people like don't really try to reach out to compliance officers that often. Usually we're like the ones that they don't really like to cold call much, because usually we're like unsubscribe immediately. We're like, take me off your list.
Yeah, I know what to say to get you to never come back again.
So we're like too knowledgeable for them in that regard. So it's been interesting of realizing how much noise there is. And then again, being like, oh shoot, there are so many different touch points that's like, no, wait, like stay focused, like be mindful. The rules that I've always been training my people of being like, hey, like slow down, verify it, report it. That's the same, even if it's me, myself, and I, right? Or you and your own personal security. It's just like of being mindful of what we're doing in our day to day, while also managing to being like, we got to get shit done. Sometimes, like, again, there's like certain risks you got to take. I will say in my day to day, the thing I can't live without is my password manager. And I really do. I'm going to say this because I was going to ask you, I'm going to go a little off script, which I know that you love when I do that, of doing some goal setting. I would like to have some goals. One of the goals, I would love to have professionals from 1Password come talk to us. It's a tool that I actually really enjoy using, and would love to just like get a team member from their space to come talk to us. Maybe not particularly on the marketing side of the house, but maybe more on their like ethos and culture. Or we'll see what they want to talk to us about, if we can get them on the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of angles that we could take with that, and we could find 5 people and have 5 very interesting, very different conversations, all from one of those companies. And not to mention, if we could get multiple of those companies. I recently, for my day job, had to do a video interview of one of the founding engineers, and a lot of the conversation centered around the ethos of the company, and why the company focused on certain things, and what the long-term ramifications of that have been. And so hearing those stories, really starting to understand, sometimes you look at two companies, they look pretty much the same. It's like, well, they all check the same boxes. It doesn't really matter which one we pick. Let's pick the cheaper of the two. But once you get to understand the ethos, why they did things the way they did, what really differentiates the code that they wrote, can really make a difference sometimes. And I think that's a really nerdy place to go, for sure. That's not your everyday person is going to be thinking about those things, but it's something that I would love for us to draw out of some of these companies that many people know about, because sometimes they're consumer based products rather than business to business based products, and just kind of hear like, why did they develop it the way they did, and what those ramifications are going to be like. I'm really excited to have more of those types of conversations.
Yeah, I'm gonna put this out there. Have I been pwned? Please come speak with us at some point. I'm just gonna keep manifesting that. I really, really want somebody from Have I Been Pwned to come talk to us, because I really advocate for them all the time. And yeah, I'm trying to think of like other topics that we're thinking about getting into. I know there's a lot of, particularly in my space right now, there's so much coming out in AI regulation. And I think starting to deep dive into those and really bring on experts that are also focusing on it, because there's so much right now. I was in actually a networking group today, and I had just like an awesome soundbite from a privacy lawyer be like, yeah, so now apparently privacy lawyers are also required to be AI lawyers. And I was like, oh yeah, that ship has sailed 100%. 100%. So I think all of us are now required to be AI experts, regardless of what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, at least to be able to spot it. Deep fakes and all that kind of stuff. We've been playing with AI for generating blog posts based on other content that we create, so that it's always, a lot of blog posts do end up being derivative works of other content. Again, you may be able to spot it as AI, but does that necessarily invalidate it because it was a derivative work that was automatically created? Like, those are interesting topics, I think, that we could definitely talk about, that aren't necessarily the how it works or how do you protect yourself from it, or even the ethics of it. It's this whole other space of how do we live in a world where AI is going to be having a major impact on our lives. I know one of the conversations that we have on the list, that came from your side, and it will be completely learning experience for me, was what auditing trends and how auditing works. And it was one of those ideas we started on, and it slowly grew and grew and grew. And finally we got to the point where it's like, well, we need two different episodes. Let's do one that's internal audit focused and one that's external audit focused. And we've had a few examples like that we've come up with, that is going to be really kind of cool to unpack, because you can almost ask the same questions and get two totally different perspectives on the situation and what we could do there.
Yeah. And again, I think it's also just like interesting to hear what's going on in these different industries. Like, for example, like I know on the audit space specifically, I've been having a lot of conversation with professionals that are auditors who are struggling with the automation tools, where that is really starting, like consumers are really starting to be like, or B2B is really starting to think like, oh, we really want to automate our audits, which I actually think is great. The intention behind it is awesome. But then hearing what that's impacting their side of the business for like an external audit perspective is really interesting. And I think that's an area where I'm actively like reaching out to my community to hear from them of what they're seeing, because it's interesting as somebody who advises clients on this particular thing of what should you do. And again, it's a lot of automation. It's not necessarily like AI generated. I'm sure it's going to get there at a certain point. Like, I'm sure that's the next feature they're all building, right? But I think there's some really interesting conversations that we're having, because things are also changing within our individual industries. Like, we're seeing rapid changes. So
yeah, it's I've started cursing whoever told me that they wish I would live in interesting times, because the times are definitely interesting and not necessarily always in a good way. So, but that does mean that we've got no lack of content. So I'm happy about it from that perspective. I'm also happy about the way things have been going, and really, really hope everybody enjoys it as much as we have, because we've got a lot of content we're going to cover, and we're gonna have a good head start to make sure that we kind of continue rolling this forward. So I think we're here to stay.
yeah, I think on that end, I think maybe we can wrap up. I think we're so excited. for where we're headed with socializing security and what we're doing here. I think we're really starting to find our stride with bringing on speakers and having additional subject matter experts come, help us learn about what they're doing and the challenges they're facing within the security IT compliance space. And so we're super grateful for those conversations and are really excited for the future ones. And let us know if you want to communicate with us. Again, the best way right now is still email, which is info@socializingsecurity.com. And we will have additional spaces very, very soon, I think. So more to come on that. But the best place to find us right now as well is on LinkedIn. You can find us at Socializing Security on LinkedIn as well.
Yep. And we're interested in hearing content thoughts or format thoughts, or if you're interested in being a guest, have an interesting story you want to tell, like don't hesitate to reach out. We may not be able to use you immediately, but we'll definitely put you on a list. And friends and family are always welcome, and strangers as well, especially because we don't know your stories yet.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to our little bit of our meta retrospective episode. And I think we should continue to do these every once in a while to just level set of how it's going.
Yeah, agreed. Hope you all are enjoying it, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Socializing Security. We hope you learned a thing or two with us.
If you'd like to continue socializing with us on this topic or have feedback, we'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn or social media. Just search for Socializing Security. Or you can email us at info@socializingsecurity.com.
Until next time, stay social and stay secure.